Just an important note before we dive in. This episode was recorded before PCOS was renamed PMOS, Polyendocrine Metabolic Ovarian Syndrome. Throughout this episode and some original episode materials, you may hear or see the former name PCOS used.
Relying on the pill as a solution for PCOS. And let's be clear, the pill does not fix your PCOS. It masks it. When you take synthetic birth control, it doses you with very low levels of estrogen and progesterone, and that tells your ovary and your pituitary gland and your hypothalamus and all of that conversation to stop ovulation, that these low levels of hormones indicate that you should not ovulate. Is that a cure for your PCOS? Absolutely not, because the problem with PCOS, of course, is that you're not ovulating in the first place. So taking birth control isn't necessarily going to do much for you because you already are not ovulating. I've spent years helping women understand their hormones, and one of the most powerful shifts I've seen is what happens when you start working with your cycle instead of against it. It's not just about fewer symptoms, it's about feeling more like yourself again, more steady, more energized, more at home in your body. We studied cycle syncing, and 92% of women had less PMS in just 60 days. If you're curious, you can try it for free. Just download the MyFlow app on iTunes or Google Play and use the code FREEMONTH. Okay, let's go into what triggers PCOS and how does this even happen in the first place. Understanding what it looks like on the symptom level and how it feels is one thing, but knowing what's actually driving it is where we start to build momentum towards planning our self-care to recover, right? And this is the part that I don't think is really discussed enough. You get your diagnosis in a medical setting, but then we're not really they don't have time, unfortunately, as much as they would love to sit down and explain all of this. So I want to give you this information. So it's important to understand that genetics do create a predisposition. Research is emerging now about really even understanding maternal mitochondrial inheritance and how that factors into ovarian function. And a lot of women with PCOS have this sort of mitochondrial dysfunction already existing on the level of the ovary. So that's important. But remember, diet and lifestyle definitely pull the trigger. And so your genes are not just your destiny, and the degree to which you will experience anything has to do with those epigenetic factors. So there are specific drivers. Most of them are modifiable. So it's really empowering when you understand it. So let's go through them. The first is insulin dysregulation. Okay. So for example, if I look back at my early childhood, let's say from 1 to 12, when I was starting to eat solid food, my household, my mom cooked everything, but it was full of she was I don't know, stress baking maybe. I just remember her constantly making desserts all the time, cookies, whoopie pies, cakes. I mean, I think it was her stress coping mechanism. And we were inundated with sugar as children, and then on top of that, dairy. Everything was like milk and cheese, and it was just a ton of that. And I was the kid who, even then, my body I remember at 5 or 6, my mom had made me a grilled cheese sandwich on a school vacation. I sat there and picked the cheese out of a grilled cheese sandwich. What kid does that? Well, a kid with sensitivity to dairy that doesn't know it yet. And I struggled with that for sure. So those types of things, I'm sharing that because those were the things that were pulling the trigger for me, on top of that genetic inheritance that I may have had. So with that insulin dysregulation, blood sugar is chronically unstable, and then your body releases more insulin to deal with that. And elevated insulin then signals to the ovaries to produce more androgens, and more androgens suppress ovulation. So around and around it goes. It's a vicious cycle, and that's the core hormonal loop for women with PCOS. It really starts with what's happening with your blood sugar every day, and what you eat, when you eat, how long you go without food. It all feeds into this loop. The second is this chronic level of stress. And stress, we talk about stress, it feels kind of amorphous, but there's a lot of ways that stress can happen to children, like irregular bedtimes, or now blue light exposure is, a problem for young girls going through puberty. But there's a lot of missing meals, going too long without meals, all of that can create stress in the body. But fundamentally, when the hormone gets involved, cortisol, that's your primary stress hormone. When it gets chronically elevated, your body, your ovaries can feel that stress, right? We now know in this new ovarian ecosystem that we have, there are glial cells, synaptic nerves, like the ovary does feel the stress. And so it starts to down regulate fertility, because fertility is being pregnant requires so much micronutrient amounts. It, requires so much of your body's energy reserves. If you're in a chronically stressed state, it would be compromising to you, the host of let's say the baby, right? For you to be going through a pregnancy. So for your own well-being, if the ovary is constantly getting the signals from you that you have these elevated levels of cortisol, it's going to throttle down your fertile factors, one of which is ovulation. So reproduction and sex drive and even your period are not necessary for survival. So we only get those gifts if we manage our inputs properly as women. And then, because now we have stress now down-regulating ovulation, that then drives androgen production again. So you get it from like two places, and it's really frustrating. So again, stress is not just emotional stress, right? It's overtraining, it's not getting enough sleep, it's extended fasting, it's doing a workout on an empty stomach. I mean, there's so many ways that we create stress without realizing it in the body, and the ovaries do not like it, and especially with PCOS. And then the third driver of this PCOS story is inflammation. And I think this is under-discussed in general, but with women with PCOS, we already have, because of this situation in our bodies, we already have elevated levels of inflammatory cytokines. So these are markers like CRP, IL-6, TNF-alpha, both throughout our bodies, but also especially in ovarian tissue itself. And this is critical because this is not necessarily separate from the insulin resistance. They're feeding each other. So the inflammation worsens insulin resistance, and the insulin resistance drives more inflammation. And both of them together suppress ovulation and start to accelerate ovarian aging. But also, that inflammation isn't just happening because of your own internal ecosystem. It's exacerbated by terrain. What do I mean by terrain? How many endocrine disruptive chemicals are you being exposed to that are driving an inflammatory process in your body? A multitude. I mean, it is not easy for ovaries out there in general, but when you have PCOS, you got to definitely be thinking about, are you being overexposed to microplastics? Is there mold in your home? Are you still shopping at big brand name stores for makeup and perfume and putting that stuff all over yourself? That's just further exacerbating and driving this inflammatory process. So all of this together, the insulin resistance, the chronic stress, and the inflammation, is really what drives the PCOS journey, and why you can't just treat one in isolation, because they are a vicious self-reinforcing loop. And so the good thing is that the protocol that I work with really addresses all of these things in a way that creates a virtuous cycle where we can get out of the loop and move into a next chapter. One more thing I want to talk about before we get into the protocol and what you can actually do is there are a couple things that women get wrong when they finally understand that they have PCOS, and then it's time they want to get into action. They start to want to just get aggressive about things. So I just want to make sure that we avoid some of these common pitfalls. And also, I just want to acknowledge that if you're already halfway in your journey of trying to recover from PCOS, I appreciate that you may be trying these things and that you're frustrated. And I love that you are making the effort, because I know how exhausting it is. I know how demoralizing it can feel when you're doing all this hard work and you're not seeing results. And I want to help get you into a place where whatever efforts you are going to make and put all your time and your self-love into those efforts, they're going to get you the dividends that you deserve. So here are some of the mistakes I see over and over again. If any of these things sound familiar, I want you to know it's not your fault. It's okay. We can course correct from here. First one is going low carb or cutting carbs aggressively. This one is everywhere in the PCOS conversation. And I mean, at the surface, there's a little logic to it, right? There's a problem with insulin and glucose metabolism and then insulin resistance. So, and then there's a weight problem, right? So it's pretty logical. Let's like restrict carbohydrates. Let's try to force the body to use stored fat as fuel. The problem is that the restriction further exacerbates this problem with ovulation, and it can throw your blood sugar into even more chaos because, I mean, when you have this degree of metabolic dysfunction, when you are obese, when you have insulin resistance, willpower is not something that even really exists. I mean, trust me, we are so driven by our neurotransmitters like ghrelin and leptin, and, our desire to eat or not eat is absolutely impacted by the amount of sleep we've had or our progesterone levels. And all of that is not working in your favor when it comes to dealing with PCOS. So if you try to calorie restrict or carbohydrate eliminate, you might be able to do it just sheer will for like a couple of days or maybe a couple of hours in one day. And then the, ghrelin leptin, reality takes over, and you will find that you are then overdoing carbohydrate, let's say refueling because you were restricting. And so this is where it's just not as helpful. And there's this idea of and there's research about ketogenic diets being useful for women with PCOS. I like it theoretically, but as someone who has a PCOS ecosystem, the amount of fat that you have to consume for a ketogenic diet to actually be, giving you those levels of satiety from a neurotransmitter perspective might not be compatible with your already fatty liver, because that's the other problem of all of this insulin resistance is that you may end up with fatty deposits in the liver, like someone who has an alcohol problem, and it's harder for you to metabolize fat. So having bacon and butter and 17 egg yolks and you might not actually do well with that from a cholesterol perspective. And women with PCOS are already at greater risk for heart disease. So I think more research is needed there. But I think the idea of this, any sort of extreme diet, for me, having lived with PCOS for all these years, I've tried them all and none of them actually work. So this is, let me save you some time, that I haven't seen it work personally or professionally with cutting out carbs or really being cutting calories aggressively. Again, it might work for a short period of time, but the rebound from it is humbling. Let's put it that way. Okay, another one that I think is something to be aware of is Vitex, and taking that without knowing what your LH levels are. Vitex is definitely recommended for PCOS because it's one of the few herbs that helps the pituitary gland indirectly make more progesterone, and it can be very helpful in that process by raising your LH levels. But you may have the type of PCOS where your LH levels are already too elevated. So taking Vitex could actually make things worse. So simply get your LH levels tested, get your prolactin levels tested as well while you're there, and just know that before you just start taking that particular herb, okay? If you've ever wanted to ask me your own hormone questions, the Ovary Club Insiders is where you can do that. You'll get access to private podcast episodes where I answer real member questions with clear, science-backed guidance you can actually use. Join us at alisaviti.com/insiders. The next one is relying on the pill as a solution for PCOS. And, let's be clear, the pill does not fix your PCOS. It masks it. The bleed that you experience whenever you take synthetic birth control is not a period. That's true if you have PCOS or anything else. It's not an actual period. It's just breakthrough bleeding. When you take synthetic birth control, it doses you with very low levels of estrogen and progesterone, and that tells your ovary and your pituitary gland and your hypothalamus and all of that conversation to stop ovulation, that these low levels of hormones indicate that you should not ovulate. That is what is sort of happening in a slightly, obviously different way, postmenopausally, right? So this is a forced kind of pseudo-menopause. Is that a cure for your PCOS? Absolutely not, because the problem with PCOS, of course, is that you're not ovulating in the first place. So taking birth control isn't necessarily going to do much for you because you already are not ovulating. And when you come off of the medication, their rebound with symptoms can also be really problematic, and it can even make it harder for you to get that ovarian brain conversation going again in the first place, right? So I think it's important to understand that before you consider that, it really is worth your effort and time to think about getting to these root causes instead of, thinking that that pill could be a magic solution for all of your symptoms. Most of the time, it is not. And I think it's worth understanding that you have a lot more that you could do to navigate your symptoms. Okay, another one is this over-exercising or doing like high-intensity workouts every day. I know also this could feel counterintuitive because like more exercise should help if there's a weight problem and insulin resistance. And but the reality is intense cardio, and notice I'm not talking about strength training here, but I'm just talking about these like long form boot camp classes and lots of cardio and high intensity kind of style workouts, maybe like workout of the day, like CrossFit types of things that are more cardio based. The thing that's happening here is it's going to increase appetite, which could be problematic for you while you're dealing with this metabolic dysregulation. And it's going to drive cortisol levels higher because that's what intense exercise is supposed to do. We're supposed to adapt to it, and that's supposed to make us more adaptive to stress long term. But women with PCOS already have an impaired response to cortisol because of this whole mess that you're in at the moment. And so pushing hard in that way doesn't help either, right? So exercise is absolutely important. It's just this extreme exercise is a little bit like draining a battery that's not really fully charged. So think about it that way. And then the last thing is ignoring the gut. Hormone clearance relies on gut function. So if your digestion is sluggish, if you're chronically constipated, if you have like IBS with diarrhea, if your fiber intake is low, if you're, constantly bloated, all of this signals microbiome problems in the gut. And there are specific colonies of gut bacteria that are responsible for helping break down estrogen. So, and just not even going to the bathroom, let's say your gut microbiome is healthy, but you're somehow just not getting enough fiber in the diet to move the bowels regularly, that's going to cause a recirculation of hormone metabolites that are active. Those even though they've been broken down by the liver, once they start to recirculate, they are still active in your body, which can exacerbate already elevated levels of androgens or estrogen and make your symptoms worse. So gut health and hormone health are not something that you can separate. Okay. I feel like this is such a good deep dive on all the things PCOS. I haven't been able to just go deep on this in a long time. So I'm hoping that you're getting a lot out of this discussion. I want to go right into the protocol because this is the part that I wish somebody could have just sat down and handed to me when I was dealing with this at 19, but I'm so glad that I'm able to do that for you today in whatever stage of your journey. And this is the protocol that I used on myself, that I've worked on, used with my patients in my clinical practice in Manhattan for the 10 years before I founded Flow Living. This is what is in the Woman Code book, the first book that I wrote that I published in 2013. And this is the basis of how I take care of myself every single day and have done for the past 25 years. So I'm excited because this protocol really gets at, it addresses all the things that we talked about, but it does it by getting at the root causes, not by trying to triage your androgen levels or, deal with your blood sugar in these sort of like spot treat ways. We're really getting at the things that are going to help you. So let's go through the steps. The first step, non-negotiable, foundation, is blood sugar stability. Nothing else. Do not pass go. Like, in Monopoly, don't do anything else in this protocol if you don't do this. Because if you don't do the blood sugar stability part, every other aspect of that vicious loop is going to just be triggered. And so you'll make no real progress without this step. So the goal, what is your goal? What do I mean by that? Blood sugar stability. Keep your blood sugar levels in a nice, stable curve throughout the day. So that means that whatever your resting glucose levels are, you don't want to have a swing after a meal that's greater than 20 points. And that's a generous swing, right? So I'm not looking for something that's super tight. I just want you to not be spiking up so high, like 50 points, and then dropping down to a low of a hypoglycemic state, right? Like, under 80 on a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, which I highly recommend that you use for at least 2 weeks. One of the scanners will sit in your arm for 2 weeks, and that's plenty of time for you to play around with your food, the amount of carbohydrates, when you're eating, how much you're eating, the types of carbohydrates you're eating, for you to start to see how your body responds to each of those things. And then you may not need it after that. 2 weeks is plenty of time to collect a ton of data on how you respond to carbohydrates and glucose, and for you to get a sense of how much you can tolerate. I can't really tolerate that much. I used to be able to tolerate a little bit more. As I'm getting older, I can't tolerate as much. So I do a CGM at least once a year just to kind of like audit what I think I can tolerate and what my body is actually tolerating. So it's a great tool, a great useful biohack, but not one you have to wear constantly unless you like it. And, I don't love having stuff stuck into me. So 2 weeks is about as much as I can tolerate. Okay. Now, what does it look like practically after you're sort of like getting the data? I find some good best practices are eating breakfast within an hour or an hour and a half of waking up is critical. You need to, and I'm going to do a whole other video just on breakfast and women. The research is very clear. You're going to say, but Alisa, I thought fasting and intermittent fast. Nope, doesn't work for you. And it definitely doesn't work for you as a woman. And it definitely doesn't work when you have this PCOS issue. Just know that insulin sensitivity is better naturally for anyone earlier in the day, meaning your cells are able to get the glucose inside the cell better than later in the day. So skipping breakfast is a terrible thing, because if you start then being hangry in the afternoon because you didn't eat any calories before lunchtime, then you're going to put all that carbohydrate in your body when you're most naturally insulin resistant, and that's going to really exacerbate your PCOS problems. So eat a good breakfast. Aim for 30 grams of protein. Why at that meal? Because it's blood sugar stabilizing. And then figure out how much carbohydrate exposure you can tolerate. I can only tolerate about 30 grams of carbohydrates in the morning, and that has to be split between plants and starchy carbohydrates. So that's like I can have a little bit of oatmeal and I can have a lot of vegetables and a lot of protein. But you have to figure out what's going to work for you, and that's where a CGM can be really helpful. Then again, if you're using a CGM, you'll be able to see when are you starting to get too low with your blood sugar. And that's the moment where you should have a little bit more food, right? So again, it doesn't have to be every 3 hours, it could be every 3 or 4 hours. You need to have at least 3 hours between meals so that your body can use up all the carbohydrate that you put in from that prior meal. And then you might want to give yourself another dose, right? So this could be like you're having breakfast at 8, you're having lunch at noon, right? That's a good 4-hour stretch. That means you're having, you're totally empty of all that glucose at that point. And then you're having another snack around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then you have dinner, a light dinner around 7, right? That's kind of a nice way to organize the timing of your meals throughout the day. Why? We want to keep that blood sugar stable. We don't want to get ourselves into a position where blood sugar has gotten so low that then ghrelin takes over and you just are like the little gremlin at the pantry snacking on chips and chocolate and cookies, and like you just eat for 30 minutes a huge amount of carbohydrates before you're able to stop. And that does a lot of, damage from a metabolic perspective. So real meals, every couple of hours with protein, complex carbohydrates, and, veggies if you can, and some healthy fats. Know your macros. I know people are talking about macros a lot these days, but for women with PCOS, I think if you can target 30% of your meals being protein and, the standard spread is like 30, 40, 30% protein, 40% carbohydrate, 30% fat. That's a good starting point, but know what works for you. Like that does not work for me. That's too much carbohydrates, not enough protein, and it's too much fat. So I have an inverted routine where I have a huge amount of protein at every meal, 30, 35 grams of protein at every meal, 4 times a day. And then I have, about 30 grams of carbohydrates, 35 earlier at 2 meals earlier in the day. Then I start to titrate down like 25 in the afternoon and then like 20 at night. So I try to keep it lighter in the evening. And then fat, I kind of keep stable throughout each meal. I do 16 grams at each meal, 16, 20. Okay. And see how you do. And then the last thing around improving blood sugar stability, because there's only 2 ways to do it, right? With the food piece, and the other one is with muscle. Muscle is a hugely powerful organ in your system, and it's the organ of longevity. It's an organ that drives insulin sensitivity. It's a great thing to build more of because carbohydrates only go to 2 places, right? This glucose can only either make more adipose tissue, more fat cells, or it can make more muscle tissue. So you want to be lifting weights instead of doing all this crazy cardio, because the more muscle you have, then the more when you eat carbohydrates, it's going to go to fuel those muscles, and it's really helpful. So strength training with progressive overload is absolutely something you should do at least 3 times a week as part of your PCOS journey. I wish I could go back in time, in a time machine, and tell myself at 20 to start strength training. That's how fundamentally valuable it is. And it's only something that I started doing recently. So I would love for you to start that as soon as possible. And also you can increase your insulin. You can improve insulin sensitivity by doing a couple of fun little hacks. So they used to say, go walk 10 minutes after a meal. Well, you don't even have to leave your office. Like just get up and do 10 body weight squats. That is even more effective at putting glucose to work in your muscles than a 10-minute walk, instead of, it's circulating outside of the cell because of your insulin resistance. So that's a really great thing to do after every meal. And the other thing I love to do when I'm sitting down at my desk during the day is I do soleus muscle pumps. So this is like calf pumps, because just doing 10 of those every hour is hugely valuable in terms of supporting healthy blood sugar, right? Because we're creatures that are designed for walking. And so it kind of stimulates the same walking muscles in your calf, and it tricks the body. I think that's a really smart hack. And then there's a supplement combo that is really powerful here that has a lot of clinical research around it that I think is useful, because also metformin is really heavily promoted for PCOS. And it's not a bad choice because it does do a lot of really cool things. But if you have methylation issues like the MTHFR mutation, there's some emerging research around how that could be compromising mitochondrial function. And in our situation with PCOS, we don't need anything that's adding to that problem. So there is a natural alternative to metformin, which is the combination of myo-inositol and berberine and turmeric. So together, the myo-inositol and berberine have been shown to be equally as effective as metformin in helping with managing blood sugar levels. So that's definitely something that you could consider as well. And it doesn't have any of the gut side effects that a lot of women complain about when they are doing that. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is reducing your sort of inflammatory and stress load, right? So we're going to talk about here, it's time to look at the ewg.org website, or get on, is it Yaku, or there's apps that you can download that will show you if your products have endocrine disruptive chemicals in them. You really need to be cleaning house in terms of what you're putting on your skin, what detergents are on your laundry. Like if I get into an Uber or a Lyft, and they have those air fresheners in, I ask them to take them down and open the windows. I mean, think about it this way. If you're out of the Uber and you take your clothes off and you let those clothes, I've done this experiment, you let those clothes air out, right, for 2 days and they still smell like that air freshener. What kind of chemical, or even laundry detergent where it stays fresh in the drawer and you still smell like you just took the clothes out of the wash 10 days later, that is going to be, that level of fragrance adherence is not good for your body. So, think about that. Think about what you're cleaning your house with. Whatever you can do to control your own personal environment to reduce endocrine disruptive chemical exposure is a non-negotiable. You have to reduce that load. And then recovery, like for stress, right? So these are things like prioritizing sleep, because deep sleep helps make progesterone. It helps with ovulation regularity. It helps with melatonin production, all of which is involved in ovulation. And rest on the weekends, like don't overschedule yourself, like try to reduce your stress load. And then one thing that I really love as a biohack for dealing with stress is using, if you've never heard of it, a vagal nerve stimulator. A VNS. There's many, many companies. You can Google this. They're really easy. There's kind of like a special vibration device. You can put it over your sternum. It helps stimulate the vagus nerve. This helps your nervous system quickly get out of fight or flight mode, which can be really helpful for those of you who are dealing with anxiety with your PCOS. I think it's a really smart biohack and one that's worth the money. And they're not that expensive. And then if you wanted to add in an herb to deal with your stress, ashwagandha is a great one if that's helpful. On the inflammation side, supplements are really, really helpful after you've removed all the EDCs. I would say this is really essential for women with PCOS. This is definitely something I've been doing for a long time. So omega-3 fish oil, very anti-inflammatory for women. It reduces those inflammatory cytokines. So we need that. It also helps improving insulin sensitivity, and it protects ovarian function. Turmeric, also important for those inflammatory cytokines. So again, for women with PCOS, really helpful. N-acetylcysteine helps to reduce C-reactive protein and IL-6, which are already elevated for women with PCOS. So really helpful. Also, NAC, N-acetylcysteine, helps with liver detoxification. The polyphenols, specifically from green tea, very, very helpful. Those compounds directly inhibit the TNF alpha and IL-6, those two inflammatory mediators that are in PCOS, and magnesium, critical for insulin function and adrenal function. So, and also women with PCOS tend to be deficient in this, as do most women. So really helpful with their symptoms. And another thing here is, please really consider eliminating alcohol. I stopped consuming all alcohol at 35, and it's just an accelerant. It drives inflammation. It's like a huge glucose bomb. It's totally disruptive to your blood sugar. It's not going to be helpful with your tendency for fatty liver. It has chemical load in it. It's a class 1 carcinogen. It's definitely going to affect estrogen metabolism. And I know it's not always what people want to hear, but it is what the science says. And I think if you are really serious about getting better faster, there is not a place for alcohol in your PCOS recovery journey. Okay. Step number 3, support your gut and liver health, right? Also non-negotiable, because your gut and your liver are responsible for metabolizing hormones and getting them out of your body. So eat enough fiber every day. I mean, if I told you, I think breakfast I do 250 grams of vegetables. Lunch is 200 grams of vegetables. Dinner is another 200. I eat a lot of plants throughout the day, a lot of fiber. My carbohydrates are all high fiber types, so either a little bit of oatmeal or sweet root vegetables. Like, I really try to get that fiber in. I make every meal count. That helps. And Then from a supplement perspective, you can also consider taking a probiotic if you need to. If you do a gut test and you see that there are specific things you need to work on, address those. Supplements that help break down excess estrogen are diindolmethanone, so DIM. That's really helpful. And then alpha lipoic acid really helps with the liver. So those are two that I think are really helpful. Okay, let's talk about step 4, which is helping your body deal with those excess androgens. Women with PCOS have excess androgens, okay? So it's that coming from high levels of insulin and elevated luteinizing hormones. So this will stimulate androgen excess production in the ovary. So to counteract that, I find that there are a couple of things that really help. Three supplements that I've used for a long time: reishi mushroom and reishi mushroom and spearmint. Both have solid research behind their anti-androgenic effects in women with PCOS. So you could do 2 cups of spearmint tea a day. I don't like spearmint tea; it's very cooling, and I run cold, so I find that I like it better in supplement form. Saw palmetto acts as a natural DHT blocker to protect hair growth. So that's a really nice one. And then zinc helps to balance testosterone levels as well. So that's really good. And I know that I've mentioned a bunch of supplements today. Obviously, as a person with PCOS in her ecosystem, I found it to be a little challenging to get everything that I wanted to be taking at the correct doses that I wanted to be taking them at, that were studied to have any impact at all. Because, you can take the wrong amount of berberine, but you think you're doing something because you're taking some berberine. But if it's not the level that has been researched to do anything from a blood sugar perspective, you're just wasting time and, as like I always say, making very expensive urine. So I, of course, then ended up feeling forced and like it was necessary for me to formulate my own supplements. It was actually how I ended up creating supplements in the first place for myself and for my clients. And I launched those back in 2017. So there is what I would recommend for you to check out on the Flow Living website, that my personal PCOS formulation. It's 2 bottles. It's an AM and a PM, and it has everything that addresses blood sugar support, inflammation support, estrogen elimination, liver health, and dealing with these excess androgens. There isn't anything else like it on the market. So I would really love for you to give it a try if you're struggling and you want to kind of see some quick results. If you go to flowliving.com, you'll see it there, and it's easy to quickly pick out. Okay, the 5th thing that you can do to help yourself as a strategy is leveraging some femtech devices to help you track your cycle and see if you're making progress, right? Because you're going to be doing the first 4 steps. And the whole point of it is for you to get back your ovulation and to see progesterone levels rising. So we're now living in this amazing new world. I mean, I can't call it a golden age because that would imply that there was something before, or even a renaissance, because it's never happened in all of human history. It's the coolest, awesome. I'm so happy to see it happening and proud to be a part of it. The tools that we have now direct to consumer as women to understand what's happening inside of our bodies with our hormones is unprecedented. So let me walk you through some of the best options. Urine-based hormone tracking, hormone metabolite tracking is amazing, right? There are many devices out there. For the study that we did with cycle syncing, we used the Mira device. They're great. They measure your actual hormone metabolite levels in your urine, which are almost 1-to-1 with blood draw. So, I mean, it's just as good. There's no need. And what's better about it than a blood draw is that you can see it every single day of your cycle. So you can see your hormonal patterns changing in real time, which is what you need to see. A blood draw is just that one little moment when you got your blood drawn. It doesn't really tell you, is your progesterone rising at the right time? Did you ovulate? It doesn't tell you that. So I love this option because it really gives you that visibility into, are your efforts improving your hormones? So it's so powerful, so motivating, and super helpful, of course, if you're trying to conceive. The second option is like a wearable ring or band tracking, any of those devices that help track body temperature continuously throughout the night and give you some sleep score really will help see if ovulation and progesterone levels are moving. And I think that that's really can be helpful, as long as it doesn't make you stressed out to see that you didn't get good quality sleep. So you could wear them some days, you don't have to wear them every day, whatever you want. The third option, which has been around forever, it's the cheapest, it's the most accessible, is basal body temperature tracking. So, or BBT. All you need is a basal thermometer, which you can buy at the drugstore for dollars, and you just stick it under your tongue first thing in the morning before you move, before you get out of bed. And there are apps you can connect it to where you can see your BBT over time, the basal body temperature, which changes during ovulation and when you're making progesterone. So if you can see that that's happening, then any one of these things is going to really help you start to see the impact of all your efforts, right? Or if you need to kind of keep digging in and doing more work in any of those steps of the protocol. My recommendation is just start with whatever tracking feels good to you and start now. Start while you're getting started with the steps of the protocol so you can have your baseline and you can start to see how that changes. You don't have to wait to go see a practitioner. This is all stuff you can do at home, which is what I love. You get the information, you get the right steps, you get a way to track and measure your progress, and you are off to the races. And I love that you can just go from guessing to knowing and stay motivated to keep doing the things that are working. Before I get into the recap, I just want to speak to the women who are in the hard part of this journey right now. I get the voice in your head so profoundly, the one that's like, this isn't fair. Why do I have to go through this? Why is this so hard? The one that when you watch, I used to watch my friends like just eat pizza. It's like a silly little thing, but I remember that was like a big thing in high school. Everybody would or college, like everybody just eat pizza. And I'd be like, I can't eat that. First of all, the cheese would make me feel terrible. But like, if I had just sat down and had like so much pizza, I would just or soda. It seems like when you're going through this, that everybody else can eat whatever they want and do whatever they want and never track a macro and never worry about their cycle. And everybody else has it so much better than you. And I still hear that voice sometimes, for sure. But it's okay. It is a little harder for us. I'm not going to lie. We do have some things that are not stacked in our metabolic favor. And that is just what it is, right? So you have a choice fundamentally, right? You can focus on the fact that you have some of those challenges and that is where you want to stay focused. Or you can focus on the fact that you have those challenges and you want to help, right? And it's your call. But if you start to do the things that help you, you will start to feel better. And here's the other thing that I'll tell you. Other women that you're looking at for whatever reason that you perceive might be having it easier right now, every woman at some point in her ovarian aging journey will have to do all of the things that you're having to do now because of your PCOS. Right? Everyone's going to have to get right with their blood sugar, their inflammation, their supplements, like their exercise. It's all part of the process. It's just a matter of when. I look at it like a huge advantage now in retrospect at almost, I'll be 49 in a few weeks, right? Or by the time this episode airs, I will already be 49. And because I've spent the past 25 years doing the things that I just outlined that you start doing, I'm in a great place now with my perimenopause self-management that a lot of women are just trying to figure out how to do for the first time, and they're dealing with a lot of symptoms. So I know it can feel really hard in the moment, and it can feel a little bit unfair, but there's a gift, there's an opportunity here as well when you do really shift your identity to someone who's a hormone biohacker, who's, really taking care of her hormones and her ovaries. It is going to help you short term. It's certainly going to help you deal with your PCOS diagnosis because it is something to take very seriously, but it's also going to give you huge dividends long term, right? Instead of all these scary things in your prognosis, you're going to really shift the trajectory of your health. And that is totally worth the effort, even if it's a little unfortunate that you have some genetic predisposition or other things that have put you in this position. So I get the frustration. I totally get it, but it's worth it. Okay, let's recap. We talked for a long time today. We covered a lot of ground. I wanted to not leave any stone unturned because this subject is so near and dear to my heart. So let's recap here. First, PCOS can come in a variety of different presentations. It doesn't always look like the way that mine looked. It can look worse. It can look like not something that you can easily see visibly. The type can affect your treatment plan or your special area of vulnerability. And make sure that you ask for a full panel of, fasting insulin, blood glucose, DHEAS, circulating androgens. Get everything you need to help you make your decision about your care plan. Second, blood sugar regulation is the foundational step, regardless of the type. Try eating breakfast earlier, try having more food at breakfast, and try eating more regularly. See if you can use a CGM. You could probably get one prescribed for you because of your PCOS. And so you can do that. Do 10 squats after every meal. Try biohacking your blood sugar, right? Instead of just hoping that it somehow magically takes care of itself. Be proactive about that. Anti-inflammatory supplements are really helpful because we already have, as PCOS women, higher levels of those pro-inflammatory cytokines. You want to use strategic supplementation here for sure, because it's just hard to get all of that from food these days. And it really helps. And then you can also do that for excess androgens as well. So I find that, you can't not do the food piece, but you also definitely want to do the supplements on top of it, both together. And that's, I think, why my approach has been so effective for so many women. It's a combination of macronutrient therapy, AKA your food and diet, and micronutrient therapy, looking at strategic but properly dosed supplements that really help the body do things better or deal with the vulnerabilities. And you can go to Flow Living again if you want to pick up that PCOS support that I formulated. Next one is support your gut, right? Gut health and hormone health, so critical. Make sure your bowel movements are regular and healthy. Do everything you need to do to make that happen. And then track your cycle and confirm ovulation. That's your report card every month. Did you ovulate, right? And if you didn't, you got to start thinking, what did I do this month that might have thrown me off? Go through the steps and say, I wasn't balancing my blood sugar as well this month. And therefore you saw that in your hormone metabolites or your BBT. So be tracking. Tracking your cycle is the fifth vital sign outside of blood pressure and temperature and all of that. You want to be tracking it. It's really important. And just a couple of other thoughts, fertility with PCOS is totally possible. Natural fertility with PCOS is possible. At later ages is possible, but it all is contingent on how well you're taking care of your ovaries and your hormones and your endocrine system and for how long. So the time to start, if you're thinking about being a mom someday, the time to start is right now. And then the last thing is your body's not broken. Yep, you've got some things not stacked in your favor, but your body is responsive. Your endocrine system wants to be in homeostasis. Change your inputs and you're going to see the outputs from a hormonal perspective, start to shift. And be patient. Hormonal health and changing all of this takes time. Give yourself 6 months, set expectations that are realistic and be consistent. It's that consistency that really pays off in the end. All right, that's it for today's episode of the Ovary Club. And obviously this one took me longer to share about because I wanted to share my personal journey and I wanted to really touch on the emotional aspect of dealing with a chronic disorder like this. I don't really get to talk about my obesity that often, and I wanted to share that with you guys. And I want to know that you're here, because you're looking for that information. And even though I'm sharing vulnerably and it, is a little bit uncomfortable to share all those low moments that, we're here in a community together to learn from each other, to support each other, and to make sure that we can all rise together to a new level of feeling the way that we should and that we deserve to feel as women. So that's obviously why I built the Ovary Club. That's why we're here every week and why I'm going to keep showing up every week for you with everything that I know to help you feel the way that I think we're designed to feel as women. If this episode meant something to you, If it moved you, if you heard your own story in mine, if something shifted, if you feel less alone, please share this episode with someone you care about. So many women are dealing with PCOS, and even if not PCOS, another hormonal condition that can feel chronic and debilitating. Share it with the women in your life who are struggling. Share it with somebody who's just got diagnosed, and let women know that there's another way. I know that this information can change lives. I hope it's helping you. It changed mine. If you want to go deeper on everything that I covered today, be sure to subscribe to my special community. It's called the Ovary Club Insiders. It's my exclusive podcast membership group that gets you bonus content. I do Q&As every month that are only specially for this insider group. And I'm going to get to answer your questions directly. So the link is in the show notes. And if you're not yet following the podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please do that. And also, please leave a comment. I really want to know what you thought of the show. And it also helps other women find this podcast and get the benefits of listening to all this information. Thank you for being here. Thank you for trusting me with your time, with your story, and with your ovaries. With so much love, I will see you next time.